Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is Tim Corcoran. Paul and Tim are talking about man and nature.
Just to kind of lay the foundation for everybody to get a sense of who you are and how you got into all this and get some of your background. So could you share like your developmental story and what ultimately led you to being the guy you are and doing
Happy
what you do?
Again, it's a real honor to sit with you here in your home, and thanks for hosting me and my son as well. My 13-year-old is out romping around the property here.
Yep, watching out for rattlesnakes.
Watching out for rattlesnakes, exactly. So I'm 49.
Yeah.
I grew up in the 80s. And growing up, we were actually just talking about this. I grew up, I was always a very sensitive boy.
Yeah.
Emotionally sensitive, spiritually sensitive. And very full of chi, of life energy, of vital life energy, which was a lot for a parent, right? Now I grew up, as you know, I've got two of them, so I know as well now on the other side.
Yeah.
So growing up, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in a little town called South Bend, Indiana, home of Notre Dame football. And being a sensitive, wild boy full of life, back in those days in the 80s, we had the run of the woods. I was able to run wild and free through the woods and through my imagination and have, in many ways, a beautiful, beautiful childhood. But there were a couple of key elements that happened early on in my development that really set me on a certain trajectory that I'm on today. One was my sensitivity opened me up to a deep connection with the natural world that I didn't realize, as a kid, I didn't realize anything special was happening. But there was a spiritual connection with the natural world that was unfolding for me early on. And simultaneously, being a sensitive kid, a sensitive boy in particular, I struggled socially, right? So I faced some difficulties early on. I faced bullying in school. I faced, my parents got divorced when I was, 15, 16.
That's always painful.
Yeah, and there was some abuse in there also early on.
Yeah.
So with these difficult experiences that at the time, I just wanted to, compartmentalize them and throw them away. But they had an impact on my personal mythology, although I certainly wouldn't have called it that at the time.
No, yeah, but we're going to talk about
which we're going to get into.
Yeah.
And that had an impact on my self-esteem and my self-image, my self-worth. Now, simultaneously with the connection with nature and the sensitivity, nature became the place that I went to for peace, for connection, for love.
That's
right?
where I had to go to get away from everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
I found the house to be a dangerous place.
Oh yeah, the house, the school, my buddies' places, all of it, right?
Yeah.
So that that became a pathway for me that I walked and have continued to walk for a lot of years. When I was 6, my dad took us on I've got an older sister, 2 younger brothers, mom and dad. And we went on a family vacation out west, and Rocky Mountain National Park. Went up to the Badlands of South Dakota and Grand Canyon. Toured all the western states one summer when I was just a little guy, and something happened to my spirit on that trip. Something came alive inside of me, and although we didn't meet any Native American people, any teachers or elders or tribes or anything, I remember being a boy looking out. I think we were in South Dakota, the Badlands, and looking out, and I remember seeing some teepees and asking my dad, "Is that where the Native American, where Indians live?" Of course, I knew nothing. I had the whole thing romanticized and idealized, but he said, "Yeah, Timmy, that is." And on a deep level, it was a little seed, just a tiny little seed, right, Paul, that wound up growing into something big. And so fast forward through my teen years, struggled through the teen years. Now I'm 18, college, following the rules of society and, what I'm supposed to do.
Suffocating.
I was a really smart kid too, right?
Yeah.
Very good grades, advancing through academics pretty quickly, but also ostracized for that, right, by my peers.
Yeah.
So about midway through college, I had a big awakening where I realized, okay, this path is not going to work for me. I'm not going to be the guy who sits in front of a computer terminal in a cubicle for the next 60 years and waste my life away. This is not happening.
No.
And yet that's where things were headed.
Yeah.
And so I knew I was at a choice point. I said, okay, well, what do I do? Do I drop out of college and make my own way? I think I was maybe a junior at this point. And what helped me was a Professor Foley, Vern Foley, never forget this guy, 1/4 blood Oglala Lakota, teaching an introduction to shamanism.
Oh, wow.
At Purdue University, conservative Midwest University, disguised as an advanced history class. So it was like History 514, but really it was an intro to shamanism.
Thank God a real professor exists out there.
Introduced me to ideas of synchronicity, to mitakuye oyasin, that we are all related. And it really opened things up for me. It really brought me alive in a way I had never quite felt before. And I knew there was something here.
Soul speak.
Yes, there was a connection in the soul. So what happened was I decided to stick with college. I was like, well, I'll get the degree just to say that I've got it.
What was your study?
Computer science.
Oh,
actually,
exciting.
A whole other world.
Right? Totally the opposite of you.
That happened to come easy for me, and that was my dad's path. My dad was a computer guy back before it was a popular thing. So I get the degree. The day after I graduate college, I said, I'm setting out, man. So I'll never forget this. I think I drove 40 hours straight from West Lafayette, Indiana, out to a friend who was living on the Navajo Indian Reservation, Northeast Arizona. And I connected with her and eventually found my way in with the Navajo people. I knew in my heart that the First Nations people of our continent here had a connection to the earth, to spirit, that I needed personally, and that I believed was medicine for our times. I mean, at that point, I was like, "Are you kidding me? The American dream: 2.5 kids, white picket fence, dog and a cat, divorced family. It's a pipe dream.
Tons of alcohol,
alcoholism. All kinds of unconsciousness. This is not working. It didn't work for me growing up, and I need something else.
Yeah.
And so those early seeds of that trip out west were starting to blossom.
Yeah.
But I had a big stint there, probably 2 years on the Navajo Indian Reservation.
Yeah.
I was really looking for this earth-based connection to spirit that was rooted in the earth and not something floating out there, which was so common otherwise. And that was also a practical spirituality that was rooted in the five senses and the sensory experience of connecting with this earth, that offered another worldview and certainly another path forward.
It's almost what you're describing would almost fall into the category of nature mysticism. A grounded spirituality.
Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely what I was searching for. Now, at the time, I was also touring. I did some touring around to the West. Whole other side story. I met my wife in Ashland, Oregon, which I understand is where your mom lives.
Yeah.
We had a whole amazing spiritual encounter, falling in love, and oh my gosh, I mean, truly my soulmate. This is 96, right? We connected, and after about a year or so, it was apparent that this is the love of my life. Well, she had a whole thing going in Ashland, wasn't ready to move down to the Indian Reservation in Arizona, so I left. What I found on the Navajo Reservation was there was these people who were very much still connected to the earth, but all the effects of colonialism and the genocide were rampant. And so many of the Navajo at that point, of course, were just working to live a modern life. And there were little pockets of people living traditionally connected to the earth. And that was still difficult for me to access at the time. Understandably so. They had a lot of mistrust for white folks.
Yeah. Understandably so.
Yeah, understandably so. So I'd made some important connections, and there's a whole more story there, but I'm going to fast forward through it. Janine and I, my wife now, moved to, weren't married yet, but we moved down to Taos, New Mexico, and to start together our lives. And at that time, an old college buddy sent me a book, and the book was The Quest by Tom Brown Jr.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And in it, he introduced two things that really caught my spirit. One, he introduced the idea of wilderness survival, that it's possible for a human being to get all of their basic physical needs met directly from the earth without telecommunication systems and grocery stores and roadways and this whole crazy scenario. Now, as a 23, 24-year-old, that touched something. It touched the archetype of provider inside of me. Like, wow, I can be responsible for my own life. And how is it that I've made it to 23, 24 years old and not had a proficient relationship with providing for my own needs?
Yeah, well, that's a big problem today.
Yeah, it didn't feel right. It was like I didn't feel like I was in integrity with myself as a human being on planet Earth, a young adult, that I was still so dependent on the matrix, on the system. So that caught my attention.
Yeah.
That, and then on the spiritual side, Paul, he spoke about vision. He spoke about, and his teacher, Grandfather Stalking Wolf, about the vision quest and this idea that as human beings, we are each here with a spiritual purpose, a vision, and that the grand adventure of life is to discover what that is and live it. And that set me on fire. I was like, okay, this is something I can get behind. This is a possibility that I want. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I had this fire, this burning desire in my heart that this was 99. And so we went out, we found his school, we did some classes, got involved with a wilderness school starting up in Vermont. Along the way, trained in wilderness survival, animal tracking, medicinal, edible plants, bird language, the language of the forest, all kinds of naturalist skills, and mentoring. I found that this culture of mentoring, that when you find people who live close to the earth, they hold mentoring as a core value, and it's expressed regularly, right, as a way of not just passing on survival information, but of drawing out the greatness of each individual in the community. And that was something that was sorely missing, of course.
Still is.
It's
worse.
But boy, oh boy, did that do something for me.
Yeah, I'm glad it did, because I imagine, God, how many thousands of people have you probably had come through your training program?
Over 10,000 at this point.
That's a lot. I mean, that's enough to fertilize the populace a bit. We need more.
That's what we're working on. That's what we're working on.
Well, that's why I'm glad to have you on the podcast. I'm hoping lots of people that listen come join your camps. What were you doing to feed yourself before you found your flow and started making a living doing what you do now?
Oh, we were scraping by.
Yeah.
I've always been a very passionately motivated individual, motivated by my passions. So we lived very meagerly. We'd have little side jobs here and there, made a little money working as instructors at the wilderness school, but we hadn't really put the whole thing together yet. But I knew, Paul, that I wanted to invest in myself. I knew this was my life path.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed to go out there and train in deep nature connection. I did enact a wilderness vision quest, 4 days fasting, alone in nature, with the singular intention of, okay, Spirit, why am I here?
Yeah.
You show me. Let me be found by my calling. I am here. I'm offering myself up. And during that time, it was an incredible experience, and I saw that I would get married to Janine. I saw we would have 2 sons, which we now have, River and Forrest, who are now 13 and 16. I saw that we would start a wilderness school, which we did. That's Twin Eagles. That was 2005. And I also saw that eventually I would actually transcend that work and help people directly on their own deep healing journey, as well as initiating visionary development, helping others connect with their vision and calling and purpose in life, which I now do in my second organization. That's Purpose Mountain.
The important part there is that the healing aspect is often important to address, because the wounds serve often as blocking factors to the arising of one's vision. I believe the soul's always giving us guidance.
Yes.
But if you're too entangled in your scar tissue, then you become reflexively conditioned to look for what you don't want.
Yes.
You're always, looking for anything that might hurt you based on, as what Jung would call, we get driven by our complexes instead of being connected to our soul. And so I think, from my work over the years with countless people with these kinds of issues going on, a lot of them are like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know why I'm, all these big questions, right? Why am I here? What am I going to do for a living? I'm not happy. I found that the process of healing the wounds that a person's carrying is actually a process of peeling the layers of the onion.
Yes.
Because if you're not willing to do the work to heal yourself, you're probably not going to be capable of carrying the responsibility and
Exactly.
your life path is what I feel to be a labor of love.
Oh, yeah.
But love always comes with responsibility. And our first responsibility is to ourselves. And part of the problem that I've run into a million times is that not only the Abrahamic religions, but a lot of world religions teach you to negate the self.
Yeah.
And to be of service to others, which usually means be in service to some organization that has ideas for what they want you to do, not what you want to do.
Right.
Be it the church or otherwise, or government, the deal. So I found that the first step to a vision quest is to do the work to love and respect yourself enough to do your healing work, to learn to manage your mind, to look into your own, what's classically called the shadow, and see where you're creating your own demons and projecting them out into the world. And I find that oftentimes that healing process actually spontaneously wakes people up.
It can.
I know you'll know of this. I can't remember the book. I've got it in my library. But there's a group of psychologists in New York who were doing research on ADD, ADHD, and behavioral disorders. And they started taking kids out on field trips into the forest, largely. I think it was in upstate New York where they were doing this. And they found that, they found that one field trip a week where they let the kids just run loose in nature for 3 hours knocked out almost all of these disorders.
Well, and even the idea that the ADD or ADHD is a disorder, frankly, I'm sure if I were tested, I would test positive on that.
Yeah.
And I was a handful to have inside of a building or in the home or a schoolroom. But I'll tell you what, outside, those same kids, I get tons of those kids coming through our school. And what we have labeled as a disorder in the classroom, you take those kids outside, they're the ones, Paul, that are mapping in 3 dimensions everything going on. They know the bullfrogs down in the water. They see the hawk and the songbirds up in the sky and the trees. They've got the insects figured out. I mean, they've got this 3-dimensional 5-sensory awareness going on, and that same disorder is actually now a gift.
Well, I tell people all the time, don't ever use a label like that, because what you're describing is your own unique way of relating.
Yes.
And I think a big part of the problem is that, especially I found a lot of the people that have these labels are actually more intelligent children. They're like quite turned on.
Yes.
But I think part of the problem is that our entire social structure, our education structure is a very linear system.
Yes.
And
narrow.
Narrow and linear, but these kids really are parallel processors.
Yes.
Like for those that understand an electric circuit, a series circuit, the energy runs from light bulb to light bulb on your Christmas tree, but in parallel, it can run in multiple directions at once. So if a light bulb burns out, it doesn't kill the whole chain.
Yeah.
But in a series system, if one bulb goes out, all of them go out. So we're educated, you got to do this, you got to do that, you can't do that. You get somebody like you or like me when I was a kid, I was very much the same way, and my son Mon is very that way.
Yes.
You put him in a classroom situation and he just starts to vibrate.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
you let him go outside and he's happy as a clam, and 1 minute he's fishing, and then he says, okay, now I want to go climb that rock, and then I want to go, work with mommy in the greenhouse. And so my point is that I think a lot of the kids that are getting these labels are not only being stuffed into rooms full of electromagnetic pollution and bad lighting, and blocking a kid into a desk and making them memorize shit, that's just like torturing somebody.
Totally.
I hate it. I left school.
Yeah.
I only did the 9th grade. I couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I am so excited to tell you about Wild Pasture's amazing meat delivery service. They have beef, chicken, pork, and wild-caught fish. My family and I have been enjoying their meat for quite some time now, and I just couldn't wait to tell you about it any longer. We had an amazing barbecue this weekend, and I'm still high off the meat. And they use a whole network of regenerative farms, which means that you're getting a different ecosystem from each farm, which means a different nutritional profile, which means nutritional diversity, which means health and vitality, which is exactly what we need right now in the world for ourselves and our families so we can all make a difference in the world. And Matt Smith's going to tell us more about this amazing company, Wild Pastures, about their offering and how you can get it. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Paul. And I'm excited to tell your listeners what they can get today and how we can help them out. So, as you know, pastured meats are crazy expensive. And so our goal with Wild Pastures is to tap into this network of regenerative farmers and to finally create the solution of where we can get the highest quality meats delivered straight to your door for the most affordable prices around. And so we're on average seeing that we are 40% cheaper than any other delivery option out there, and that our customers have reportedly saved, on average, $1,000 on their grocery bill from meat alone. And so Wild Pastures is a regenerative meat delivery service that is solving this problem. And you can get 100% grass-fed and finished, as well as pasture-raised pork and poultry and wild-caught seafood from Alaska delivered straight to your door. So it's far more convenient. It's far more environmentally friendly because we're using regenerative farms entirely. We don't use feedlots ever. So the nutrition profiles are way better. You can definitely taste the difference. I know we were talking about this on our just before we hopped on, you having a Father's Day barbecue and how incredible the pasture-raised chicken and beef short ribs were. And you can really taste the difference, right?
I'm still high.
And so our goal is to remove the roadblock from people's minds that if they want to eat healthy, it's too expensive. And so that's where Wild Pastures comes in, is we are delivering with our own fleets of trucks whenever possible. We haven't raised our meat prices in over 3 years at this point. And we're really just creating convenience for the consumer and kind of being the high tide that rises all ships. If we can opt more people into a system like this, the cost stays down for everybody. And so there is a myriad of benefits that go into that. And so today, if your listeners want to try Wild Pastures and taste the difference and experience what it's like, go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek or click the link in the show notes and save 20% off for life, plus get free shipping for life. Plus, get $15 off your first box.
That's a mind-blowing deal. I can't even imagine. I mean, I've never heard of an offer like that. And, most people would hear an offer like that and think, this can't be that good. But I'm telling you, it's not only that good, it's really good. Or I would not be sharing this on my podcast. I think everybody needs to get a hold of Wild Pastures for their family, for their vitality, for their longevity, and for the future of this planet. So thank you guys very much. So, Matt, just repeat the website again.
Sure. Just go to wildpastures.com/Paul Chek or visit the link in the show notes and get 20% off for life, plus free shipping for life, plus $15 off your first box so you can try it.
You'll be glad you did.
I had really low self-esteem till maybe 25 years old. And interestingly for me, my healing journey did not come first. I really felt that visionary call early on and did the Vision Quest. And it was post-Vision Quest for me that my deep inner healing journey really began. And I'll tell you what, and it was through a culture that honored the natural world, right? This deep nature connection mentoring culture that really saved my life.
Yeah.
Wow, all these things that I thought were curses are actually gifts.
Mm-hmm.
I had, all these unique qualities about myself had a positive outlet for expression, and through that healing, as you said, it really opened me up to greater and greater dimensions of my gifts and of my capacity to really live my vision fully.
Yeah,
so I see that most folks these days. And I think this is even archetypally true most of the time. I'm careful not to say all of the time because there are exceptions. Mm-hmm. But I do see that a lot of folks need to start on their healing work first because it really can block discovery of vision. But not always. There are those exceptions.
Many of the vision quests that the natives used included plant medicines. So,
yeah.
There's some that do it without and some that do it with. And I think one of the reasons we're having a resurgence of plant medicines is because they can actually, in many ways, induce a vision quest. And they also are very powerful for bringing any trauma up into the conscious mind. So a person, that's one of the challenges of them if you don't have a skilled guide, because you can you can meet the devil and think it's the devil, but not realize it's you.
It's you.
And you got to learn to work with that devil. That's why I say the devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know.
Yes.
But my point being is I think, we're in the third wave of the psychedelic revival, and each of them has come when society and the world was under a lot of stress. And so I think right now a lot of people are actually not consciously thinking they're doing plant medicines to heal, but thinking they're going to do it because it's in vogue or their friends are doing it or something maybe deeper calling them, but it ultimately triggers off what can be both a healing experience and a vision quest.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially if it's done properly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's good for our listeners to, one of the ways I distinguish the healing journey from the visionary developmental journey is the healing journey is about the past. The healing journey is about coming to peace with all of that which has unfolded in my life that I'm not at peace with.
Yeah.
And I know for me, there was a lot. I had to process that trauma. I had to process that low self-esteem. I had to process my parents' divorce. That was some big stuff. It's not an overnight journey.
No, and you can't go too fast on that.
No. There's a certain pace that the heart moves at.
Yeah.
Whereas the visionary development journey is all about the future. It's all about what is my vision, beautiful vision, a more beautiful vision for tomorrow, for my life, for my family's life, for my community's life, for my Earth's life. Right. And so we have past versus future. And I think that's an important distinction. There's people you can get lost in either of those.
Oh, hell yeah. I call that, I have terms for that because it's so common.
Me too.
As you know, most people are so caught in the past. I say you are pasteurizing yourself. And, pasteurization means all enzyme activity has ceased. So you now have dead food.
Yes.
So my analogy is whenever you're living in the past, you're pasteurizing. You're cooking yourself into a death situation.
Yes.
And you're not living in the present. And if you're living in the future, but you're not present now, you're futurizing yourself.
Yes, so that can be equally dangerous.
Yes, so I basically see that there's three kinds of people: pasteurizers, futurizers, and people that are present.
Actually, right here.
And the present one is hard to get a hold of, but I think the kinds of schools you operate, this is why I teach rock stacking and doing other things with rocks, such as conditioning and making geometrical patterns on the ground, or just doing mixes with rocks and wood and flowers and just kind of being artistic.
Sure.
But the point being is you can get frickin' hurt in those rocks. You saw my rocks. I'm moving rocks that are 400 pounds out there.
Sure.
And just one wrong move and you get a visit from the pain teacher or you get killed. Broken bones. I've smashed fingers like grapes. The point I'm making is I bring people into that environment because you have to be 100% present in the now.
Yes.
And if you're not, someone's going to get hurt.
Yes.
And it's probably going to be you.
Perfect.
And I take people through a shamanic ceremony in the beginning to harmonize everybody by making music together. And I keep going till the whole group is completely in harmony. Then we begin.
So cool. Well, there's so many parallels between your work and mine. When I take people on the journey of deep nature connection, it's all about connecting. It starts off just through the five senses.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, our modern world has assaulted our five senses and continues to in greater and greater, more obscene ways. But when we go out into the natural world, the earth is here for us. It's our birthright. And one of the first things that we've got to pay attention to are the hazards, right? Like my son Forrest and I, we're staying at this cool Airbnb down halfway between here and San Diego. And it's got 10 acres. And so we're, exploring around out there. Now you guys have got down here, you've got poison oak, right? Which I'm not familiar with. Up in Idaho, we've got poison ivy, but not poison ivy. And it looks different. It grows taller here. And the leaves look a little different.
And both of them hurt.
They both hurt. And so as we're walking around, what's the first thing on my son and I's mind? Okay, where's the poison oak?
Yeah.
And so what does that do? it brings our awareness into our body, brings us into the present moment, and our eyes are on alert. And my skin is on alert. I've actually developed a sensitivity to it that I can actually feel it from, I don't know, 6 feet or so away. My skin will start, I'll get a little, it's like a minor version of the classic PI, poison ivy itch. I'll feel that, like a little mini version of it.
Well, they're all sending out their subtle energy frequencies. They've all got energy bodies. That's how I track rattlesnakes. Whenever I'm out
talking about this
with guests or people, I remember my buddy J.P. Sears is deathly afraid of rattlesnakes.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to take him out. This is years ago, and he was a student of mine. I wanted to take him out hiking with me. And he said, Paul, I don't want to go. I'm scared of rattlesnakes. I said, don't worry, I can feel them. So what I do is I just connect to the spirit of the rattlesnake and say, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to be hurt by you. I want to share life with you. Please let me know if we're getting close to one of you so that we can make sure that we make space for you. And so what happens is I begin to feel the presence of the snake inside of me.
Yes.
So, JP thought I was crazy, but we were on a 5-mile hike, and we were walking, and all of a sudden I could feel it. I said, there's a snake close by, JP. Stand behind me. Don't walk in front of me. And literally we took maybe 12 steps.
It was
a great big rattlesnake that had just recently been run over by a motocross bike and was laying there dying.
Wow.
But it was as big as that one I showed you on the video this morning.
Yeah.
Point being is, these are the natural abilities that we've lost.
Yes, exactly.
To me, everything in nature is an extension of myself.
We're all related.
We're all related. We're all connected. Steiner describes what he calls supersaturation. And from people being so overexposed to media, which he didn't talk so much about the media back then.
Because it wasn't as much of a thing back then.
Well, yeah. I mean, he died in 1925, I think.
Yeah.
But he talked about eating foods that had too much sugar and too much coffee and too much stimulants. And too much noise and the excitement of cities and buzzing. And he said it leads to supersaturation. So as you get more and more exposed to this hyper stimuli, it pushes your threshold higher and higher.
Yes.
And so you actually get to the point where normal healthy food tastes void of taste to you. So the next thing you know, you got to drown it with shit to make it enjoyable.
To get
So I think what's happening is so much of humanity is becoming super-saturated that they actually get numb to life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Isn't
Not just
crazy?
through the 5 senses, but energetically and spiritually.
Totally, yeah. And physically, emotionally, for all the different reasons that we've been talking about. From,
exactly.
Personal trauma, being numbed out in schools, studying shit that doesn't interest you.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too, and I'm confident you'd agree with this, humanity has become so conditioned to violence because there's so much of it on television all the time and in video games that we've actually had to wall off the human part of ourselves that senses the immorality of all that. So I think people actually just are physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually encased in defense mechanisms. Yeah. And it's dangerous.
I would absolutely agree. Absolutely, Paul. When a person makes the journey back to the natural world and takes this deep nature connection journey, what they're doing is they're coming back to themselves, right? That they're bringing that threshold back down. They're acclimating to the subtleties that are available to us through our 5 senses, and finding that, wow, there's gifts in that. If I can hear the alarm call of a Pacific wren bird, a little songbird from 50 yards away, and I can get that sensitive, wow, what does that enable me to do when it comes to my interactions with another human being, or with my community,
or listening to your own inner voice,
or listening to spirit, exactly,
to your soul,
to your soul, absolutely. And back to the poison ivy and the rattlesnake stories that we were sharing. While that might seem supernatural or amazing or maybe even unbelievable, every single time I've connected with someone, whether they're white or native or black or purple polka dotted, if they've got a sensitivity to energetics or to the natural world, those types of experience are commonplace.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed and trained people to go through that process and develop those things over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And so these are common capacities that we have as human beings that we've really, as you said, that we've truly lost, that are a key piece in our deeper earth-based psycho-spiritual development.
People often ask me, well, how do you remote view? And I say, well, the first thing you got to do is get over the idea that you can't.
That you can't. Exactly.
The one thing that is a limiting factor is most people's minds jump all over the place, right? So to remote view, you've got to stay totally centered on that intention.
Yes.
And you just empty yourself and hold that focus and see what starts rising up inside of you. And lo and behold. But the point is the only way you can remote view, the only way it's possible is if the consciousness that you reside in right now as Tim or I as Paul is firewalled off by your belief systems and your ego. But the only way that is possible is if you are that. There's no way around that. There's absolutely no way around that. And I think that's the disease of not realizing that is at the base of gender identity problems, at the base of racial problems. It's at the base of a lot of mental emotional disorders, depression, anxiety, and it's also at the base of our constant abusive nature, because what goes hand in hand with all that is not realizing that you're killing yourself. You're killing your small self and your big self.
And your big self. Not to mention your children and grandchildren.
And their future.
And their future.
And so the key point is that because the deeper part of us at the soul level is aware of all this, we're actually creating an existential crisis. And even though the ego is not consciously aware of it, just like somebody who can't hear the birds when they first come to your camp but hears them later, we're aware of what we're doing to ourselves. And I think that's one of the reasons that there's so much anxiety out there today, is people are getting messages from the collective that we can't keep doing this or we're going to die.
I couldn't agree more, Paul. I've long held that the core disease or core issue of our time is disconnection.
Totally.
Right? Disconnection. Disconnection from what? Disconnection from the earth. Disconnection from the self, from the deep self, just from even the superficial self.
Yeah.
Disconnection from other humans. Disconnection from community. Disconnection from soul. Disconnection from our reason for being. And therefore, I firmly believe the most important work we can do is all going to have something to do with reconnecting.
I think in many ways, the basis of what we call evil is the symptom of disconnection.
Beautiful. Beautifully said.
Look, for me to do an act, we'll call it evil. Evil means to live against life, right? L-I-V-E, backwards is E-V-I-L. So living backwards is evil. So to disrespect morality, which is a code of conduct that is life affirmative, to steal from people, to harm people, to turn them into objects, genocide, whatever it is, racial war, all that comes from disconnection. Because once you disconnect from your core self, then Tim's somebody else. Someone with a different colored skin, they're something else.
Yes. Yes.
And it's interesting, too. I had a podcast with a friend of mine, Dr. Keith Witt, who's a very, very incredible psychologist. He's one of Ken Wilber's kind of genius minds. One of the things he brought up in our conversation about this, he says, well, Paul, you might not realize this, but many native tribes did not have a word to describe somebody that wasn't in their tribe. So the way that they were able to go to war and kill these people was because they didn't have a name for them, so they became an object. They weren't another Sioux or another Cherokee or another Apache. Sure. They were something else.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's part of what's happened is we've gotten so into labeling everything and boxing it that we now see almost anything that falls outside of our belief system as an object or something else that needs to be gotten rid of. And so the point that I'm making is this issue you've brought up with disconnection. I really believe if we all realized our connection to each other and that we're all part of the same unique expression of life itself, and that we're all here to do something unique to contribute to the puzzle, to contribute to the grand picture, then we wouldn't see them as objects to be exterminated. We'd say, okay, well, what is it that they're here to do that somehow is part of what I'm here to do? I personally feel that the biggest illness we have, because the outcome of it is evil, is this whole issue of disconnection, which is why I think getting kids to guys like you to teach them how to experience the reality of themselves as part of nature is the beginning of morality. It's really the beginning of moral training.
Totally. I hold that developmentally for us as human beings, that establishing a conscious connection to the earth, right? Which, and I know in the mainstream world, there's so little connection to nature that it sounds like this weird thing out of left field. But let's just contextualize it. All I'm talking about is a human being connecting with their habitat.
Yeah.
I'm talking about a human being connecting with the planet on which they live.
Yes.
I know that's a far out thing these days, but
sadly,
we have millions of years of evolution where we lived close to the earth, and it's only in the last hundreds, maybe 1,000 years
since the Industrial Revolution.
Industrial Revolution, exactly, that we've lived apart from it.
Yeah.
So I'm holding that a connection to the earth, a conscious connection to the earth through the five senses is a developmental necessity for us as human beings.
Yeah.
And that when that's not in place, we will continue to have some sort of dis-ease and disconnection that we will attempt to fill in a variety of ways, whether that's very degenerative, like drugs, alcohol, overuse of sex, and all kinds of stuff. Or we also get the scenario where people, are stuck in a therapist's office or in a men's circle or in an ayahuasca ceremony, thinking that they're finding something that where they're searching for something that's actually not there.
Yeah.
And we've seen that. I've seen that so many times. So people describe it to me like this. Adults describe it like this. They'll say, after this is a post-reflection, right? They'll say that I get pretty frequently. They'll say, I feel like there was a veil of disconnection between me and the earth that I was not aware of previously, that lifted in my time with you.
Yeah.
And I now feel myself not as a stranger to the earth. I feel myself as part of this earth.
Mm-hmm.
I am a human being. My body has evolved here. We didn't come from Mars or out of space. And even if we did, that would be nature too.
Well, human comes from humus.
Humus. The earth.
Of the earth.
Substrate of the earth, exactly. And I use that point all the time.
In Arabic.
Took the words out of my mouth.
Well, in Arabic, it means of red earth.
Yes.
Interestingly enough.
Of the red earth.
And most people, I have not met a single Christian that can tell me the meaning of the name Adam or Eve. Adam is Adamus, which comes from the root word soil.
Back to soil.
Back to humus.
Yeah.
And Eve in Greek means life force. So you've got body, a projection, something. A projection is a masculine expression.
Yes.
And Eve is the life force.
The inner.
So the feminine is what's flowing through you is spirit.
Yes.
So that's what makes life.
Right.
We've got caught in this Adam and Eve story, and we're all sinners, and we all deserve to toil in the thorns. It's just talk about the hijacking of human mind through religion. It's unbelievable. I mean, I don't have anything against religion as long as it's real religion, but when it's used as a corporate enterprise to control people, this is what you get.
It's interesting. I was just yesterday, we're down here in the San Diego area for about a week, my youngest and I, and he's a birder. He loves tracking all the different birds and figuring out their communication and all of this and their songs and everything. And here is this massive group of people. And what are they doing? They're just sitting there quietly watching and observing all the seals and the sea lions. Yeah. And there's the moms and the pups. And there's the loud barking sea lions. And, I was 500 people that were just sitting there, and just quietly observing. Now, what is it? Now, most of these are modern folks. They're not signed up for some wilderness connection thing. It's just walking down the sidewalk, and here's all these seals and sea lions. Well, what is it in that, in the life force of the seals and the sea lions that draws these people there.
Life.
It's life, exactly. It's a wildness.
Yep.
There's a wildness that they don't have. Most of those people, I think it's safe to say, that is alluring, that is drawing like a magnet. This is the most simple thing. And as humans, we find our nature by connecting with nature is one of the things that I'm fond of saying. We find our nature by connecting with nature. And here amongst all these people, of course, they weren't on some big vision quest and they didn't have that kind of intention. And yet it was magnetizing them. They couldn't help but to pause. And some guys were there talking about, oh, this is our third day here. And this one was doing that yesterday. And he was doing the other thing. It was so cool. And frankly, it was a moment of hope for me to see the general populace engaging in an organic moment of nature connection.
I think there's also an archetypal connection, because if you think of Plato's concepts of good, beauty, and truth, when you're in the presence of nature in its natural rhythm, and you don't have all these laws and all the social constructs, you can see the beauty of it. It's very attractive to see life in its natural flow. The good of it is that it is alive. And the truth of it is that it is life itself.
Yes.
So I think there's this deep archetypal connection to what is meaningful and what is real that people are
starving for. Absolutely starving.
Hi. Did you know that there are numerous studies using specialized dyes and radiolucent markers showing that when we eat a specific organ or gland from an animal, it ends up going directly to the same organ or gland in our body? This deep wisdom has been known long before science validated it, and people like Saint Hildegard of Bingen all the way back in the 1100s wrote a diet book showing what specific meats would help heal ailments in the body. Francis Marion Pottenger, author of the famous Pottenger's cat study, used radiolucent markers and found that when we eat the adrenal glands of an animal, the molecules of adrenal tissue go right to our own adrenal glands. The body is very efficient and won't try to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. This is also true of collagen. About 15 years ago, while performing stunt lifting, I had a man fall from above right onto my head, blowing out 2 of my discs completely, tearing spinal ligaments and leaving me with spinal cord and nerve root compression. Any surgeon would have immediately wanted to fuse these joints and put metal in my neck, but I chose to rehabilitate myself, and one of the key dietary ingredients I used was collagen powder. This feeds the body the exact molecules it needs to repair the damaged collagen in my neck, and I'm still going strong. Joint degeneration is not only very common among athletes, but among workers and people of all ages today, and regularly consuming Organifi's collagen supplement may save you from a lot of pain, doctor's visits, and surgery. Give your body the resources it needs and let it do its magic. Organifi collagen uses only real food ingredients. It contains hydrolyzed bovine hide collagen peptides. This protein form is derived from pasture-raised cows. It is associated with pain relief from aches and pains in joints, radiant skin health, and even bone loss prevention. Eggshell membrane collagen. Taken from the thin layer between the egg and the shell, it is collagen-rich, and this may be beneficial for strong joint health. Hydrolyzed fish collagen peptides derived from wild-caught fish. This is a particularly useful collagen source because of its small particle size, making it easily digestible and absorbable. Chicken bone broth protein concentrate. This source provides the collagen type found in your gut, joints, and cartilage and helps support greater health both inside and out. Don't wait until you're in so much pain that it hurts to do what you love to do, or you're told you need surgery when you can feed your body Organifi collagen and feel better every day while also enhancing your nutritional profile. To get your Organifi collagen, go to organifi.com/CHEK20. That's Organifi.com/CHEK20. On checkout, use your Living 4D discount code, capital C, capital H, capital E, capital K 20, and get 20% off with your purchase of Organifi collagen. A few months ago, we as I showed, we brought bees in. We set up our
Right.
beehive down there, and we've got a second one we're building up now. And it was my kids' first time to be that exposed to the bees, other than just the bees all over the property, but to see, thousands of them at once and feel the buzz and the energy of them is quite an experience. But it was very interesting. Mana was totally entranced. I've never seen him go into a deep meditation. He didn't want to leave. He would just he'd sit right in front of the beehive, and he would just, in his little bee suit, and he wouldn't talk.
Yeah.
He was literally like a kid in a TV hypnosis, but this time it was the bees.
The bees.
And every time he goes down there, he wants to go. He always, Dad, can I go to the bees? Mommy, can I go to the bees? And as a child, I was very connected to the bees. We had a property on our pig farm in Idaho that had an old rotted out cabin that was probably 60, 70 years old or something. And it was, how they get full of spiders and crap. And there was some hornets' nests and things around there. But this is probably when I was about 8. And my stepsister's 6 months older than me. And then my brother was a year younger than me. My sister was 2 years younger than me. And we were all just kind of playing with the old pots and pans and garbage that had left there because it was just something to do when we weren't working on the farm. And all of a sudden, a swarm of bees came.
Oh.
And they all got really scared. And I intuitively knew, don't swing at them. Don't hit them.
Mm-hmm.
Just relax. You'll be okay. But they got scared and ran. I just stood there. And within seconds, my entire body was covered with them, literally from head to toe. I mean, I'm talking every part of me. And I was just worried that I might breathe one in, or because they were walking on my lips and all around my nose. But I knew innately not to be afraid, and just, I just would blow air out my nose to keep them out of my nose.
Stay calm.
But they just walked all over me, and I had this strange feeling of kinship.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it with another word. Kinship.
Exactly.
And I've always had this passion for the bees. And then years later, when I started studying shamanism, and I went through a power animal retrieval, the first power animal that showed up was the bee.
The bee. Of course.
And I got to tell you a funny story about that.
I love it.
I was going through a midlife crisis when I turned 50. I just burnt myself out trying to save the world, which is not a good idea to do. You would that's saving yourself first.
Yeah.
But I was just exhausted, and I was just going into deep meditation in the sauna, and it just dawned on me that I should talk to my bee family, because you can have a single power animal or you can have the family. Like I have the butterfly family, for example, for my heart chakra, but I have a single hawk for my third chakra. And so I connected to my bee family, and I said to them, I said, this is what's going on in my life. What should I do? And 2 bees showed up in my inner vision, and they started doing a little dance, and then they shot light into me and communicated to me telepathically, right from their eyes to my eyes. I could see like streams of violet light coming to me, and I could hear what they were saying. And they both looked at me, and here's what they said. Paul, no bee can make honey alone. And I got it. I said, oh, you're telling me I need to delegate more. And they said, yes, you're trying to do too much by yourself. And that was really like a turning point for me. I'm like, okay,
But can I ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
Would you say, Paul, that it was more, I've got a feeling I know the answer to this, but would you say that it was more than a data transfer? It was more than information being told to you, but would you characterize that as almost an energetic empowerment from the bees to you? Like they somehow helped you to find the qualities of energy from within in order to do that, in order to start delegating?
I think what I experienced as that the intelligence of the bee, the consciousness of the bee, was telling me as a human being, the reason you've come to us is because you want to learn how we do it.
Yes.
How do we do it together?
Yes.
We're not tired because we work together. You're tired because you're trying to do too much alone. So the feeling that I had was that the consciousness of the bee was communicating bee
Yes.
wisdom.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I had gotten too trapped in my own egoic pursuit
Exactly.
of
Exactly.
success. Why?
Yep.
Because I'd hired so damn many employees that didn't do their friggin' jobs. And I constantly had, me and Penny forever have had staffing problems. And finally, after 25 years, we
There it
managed
was.
to get a staff together. But the point I'm making is that what I sensed was that nature, through the bees, was giving me the awareness that I needed
Yes.
to be more like the bees.
Yes.
And so my sense was that because I had gone to them for help, they were giving me help the way they give each other help.
Yes.
They were telling me, this is how we can do it.
Yes.
This is how we can make honey.
It reminds me of the Bushmen, the San Bushmen of Africa have this idea, what we're talking about here, of threads or ropes of connection between human beings and all of life.
Yes.
So this idea that between myself and a bee, or between myself and a moose, or between myself and another individual human, there is like an energetic, you could imagine it like a thread.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we're born, these start off as very thin little threads, but over time, the journey of life is to strengthen these through connection, through connective practices, through the five senses, through asking for help, through going through the journey of life and approaching it from a community-based approach. There's a guy, PhD Bradford Keeney, who wrote a book called Ropes to God, based on this idea. And that as we develop these connection points, that these, what would seem to a modern person as incredible or supernatural or impossible feats, actually become commonplace.
Which is a problem in itself, right?
Which is a huge problem because the power of belief is so strong, as you well know.
I mean, too, just the whole idea that we think the supernatural is so mysterious.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I mean, that means you're really stuck.
Exactly.
Right? It should be called supernormal. What is normal today is a state of deep pathological disconnection.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore, you're already disconnected from what is natural. And what is normal is not normal.
No.
100 years ago, most white people walking into an Indian reservation and not having those senses, they would have felt sorry for you.
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to survive out there?
Who was it? Krishnamurti, who said it's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society.
Exactly.
Here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
You mentioned five senses a number of times, which I agree with, but I also think there's another extension of that. Our five senses are important, but they're a very narrow window to reality, right? They're frequency bands. They're very narrow. It's all been scientifically documented. I've got it all here in my library. In my studies of alchemy, there's a number of meditations alchemists use. And the point I'm driving at is that one of the types of meditations they do is practice seeing who's seeing through your eyes. So don't just look at what you're seeing like I'm looking at Tim right now. But in this meditation, like if I was sitting with you in this meditation, I would have to go back behind the five senses and experience who's looking at Tim and using my eyes. Well, it would turn out to be exactly who's looking through Tim's eyes at Paul. And then one's called listening to the listener, feeling the feeler, tasting the taster, smelling the smeller. So over a course of years, I would be practicing these meditations. And so what happens is behind your senses is the supersensible abilities. And that's where clairvoyance comes from. That's where clairsentience and clairaudience and intuitive knowing comes from.
Yes.
And I think that's where we really want to get people to, because the five senses do connect you to the reality of the stuff that's here. But when you get behind it, the stuff that's here turns out to be the rest of you.
Yes.
And then you start, that's why remote viewing is so possible once you get there, because you realize I'm just looking at the sun of myself,
Yeah,
or the
exactly.
galaxy of myself, or
Exactly.
the Tim of myself.
Mhm.
And the progression of reorienting yourself to the five senses is to get to the super sensible abilities
Exactly.
that we all have.
That's been my experience, that when people, and it was certainly the case for me, that when people make the journey of deeply connecting to the natural world through the five senses, and in that subtle way that we were talking about, that yields a greater connection to the sixth sense, and then seventh, eighth, ninth, tenth. There's someone who's actually identified, I don't know what it was, like 40 or 50 different
Yeah, Steiner's lists
senses.
12 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, but absolutely, I couldn't agree more. The five senses are just focused on physical reality.
Yeah.
But I think the hazard is that we see today in today's world, Paul, is that people try to skip that. They try to skip the physical reality and jump straight to the spiritual, or jump straight to all the clairvoyance. And, all that. And there's nothing wrong with clairvoyance and all of those spiritual realities, but there is a hazard to avoiding physical reality.
Well, yes. And in Steiner's teachings, that's called the Luciferian influence. Because Lucifer wants to take you out of the world, and metaphorically speaking, why deal with all that stress and pain and harshness? You can come be with me and you'll be free. He says Lucifer actually incarnated in the East about, oh God, what was it? It was probably about 3,000 years before Christ or something like that. I can't remember the exact date, a long time before Christ. But that he says Lucifer's influence is what brought us the Eastern religions. And what is one of the key tenets of Eastern mysticism or Eastern religion? For example, Vedanta in Hinduism. It's all Maya.
Right.
It's an illusion. Get out of it. So you have all these Eastern mystics that go off, meditate in caves, and completely detach from the world, because it's all an illusion, right? So the point I'm making is that this modern kind of new age spiritual, I'm going to be a clairvoyant, which is developing CDs or powers, is really also almost a form of attention getting or trying to make yourself better than somebody else. But it's a departure from the five senses, and it's a dissociation.
Yeah.
It's getting out of the world.
Yes.
And I think, like you got to get into the world first.
Yes.
Because until you're in the world, you don't know what you're getting out of.
Well, and it's so easy to use that approach to also avoid our healing journey. If I've got trauma that's unprocessed and I don't want to feel vulnerable, I don't want to feel uncomfortable, I don't want to face all that stuff and feel all that pain and all that sadness and all that anger. Oh, it's real easy. Yeah, I'm just going to meditate my life away here.
Yeah.
And all is one, one is all, and physical reality is just a big illusion anyway.
Right.
Are you kidding?
And the problem though with that too is that leads to foregoing the responsibilities of love.
Yes.
And relationship.
And life on planet Earth.
Yes. I mean, look at Buddha. He left his wife and kid and just disappeared, right? I mean, so here we have the founder of Buddhism who completely ignores his responsibility as a man.
Yeah.
And there's many other similar stories all throughout religious leaders, but I think part of the modern kind of new age spirituality is really more of a getting out of, and so is a lot of the plant medicine, the psychedelic community. It's checking out.
Exactly.
Timothy Leary, tune in, turn on, and drop out.
Drop out, yeah.
Well, no, nothing's going to change if you drop out.
Right.
Right? Tune in, turn on, and get busy and contribute.
Yes. Show up.
Do something,
Yeah.
right? And so that's one of the concerns I have with the, now that plant medicines are becoming legalized and, people are getting
so popular,
clinical grade MDMA and psilocybin and, all that stuff. Pretty soon we're going to have a Luciferian phenomenon again, kind of like, in the Timothy Leary Ram Dass era, where people were just getting stoned out of their mind and painting their bodies and dancing naked and having sex all day, which is all fun.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not going to fix much.
No, it's not going to transform the earth.
And the people that are the challenge for us, the ones that are guiding all this craziness in the world, they're not taking a break.
Yeah.
They're not copping out.
Yeah.
They're busy trying to control your life and turn you into a profit center. And getting stoned and using your clairvoyance to look at a tree is only good if you're going to protect the trees.
Exactly.
Otherwise it's just another game that people are playing, and it's interesting how life can catch you either way. You can get hardcore materialist and think only about money, fame, and success and get lost.
Yeah.
Or you can go the other way and go Luciferian and become an Eastern mystic guru and meditate your way out, or you can stone your way out. The problem is there's hardly anybody left in the middle
who's actually
tending to the garden.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. One of the things I kept meaning to bring up, a lot of people don't know how to love, and they feel very disconnected from nature. So, because as a therapist working with people all over the world, most of them live in cities. So, it's hard to say start a garden. What I do say is, look, buy a plant. Go to a garden shop or wherever you can buy a plant. A supermarket will sell them. Safeway sells them.
Yeah.
And just develop a relationship with the plant.
Yeah.
And notice what happens when you don't water it.
Yeah.
It starts to die.
Yeah.
Really just have a relationship with a plant and notice it knows where the sun's at.
Mm-hmm.
As you relate to it, it'll tell you when it's thirsty. It'll communicate to you. And I think if people would just literally start with something as simple as living in an honest relationship with a plant or a pet, but something that's alive, and then you actually begin to be consciously aware of the responsibility of love.
Yeah.
And you get feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I don't water my plant, it dies. I don't water my dog or feed it, it dies. And that's where we've got to get back to. And I think it can be as simple as just paying attention to what it takes to keep a plant or a pet healthy, and not as an object, but as a living being. Right?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I imagine you know that magnesium is one of the minerals that people in North America are the most deficient in, but it's an extremely important mineral to have in your diet regularly. And believe it or not, Bioptimizers has improved what was already well known to be the best magnesium formula out there, called Magnesium Breakthrough. So I've got Wade Lightheart with me to explain what it is they've done to improve this already excellent formula. Wade, what is new about your new Mag Breakthrough formula?
Well, it's called sucrosomial magnesium. So we have 7 different types of magnesium in Magnesium Breakthrough because they're uptaken by different parts of the body. But a new type of magnesium has been created called sucrosomial. And what it shows in the research in science is that it's actually even more absorbable by the body, particularly inside of the brain, which is a big aspect to enhance neurotransmitter formation, as well as ensuring the rest and relax response in the nervous system that a lot of people will take magnesium for. They find it, clocks them down, helps them sleep better, allows for the relaxation of striated and smooth muscle tissue in the body, which creates an energetic relief. And so when we added sucrosomial, we were able to demonstrate inside our lab facility that we were able to get better improvements. Of course, we have a partnership with the Birch International University. We have some patents we're working on, which will kind of relay some of these things. But sucrosomial was a no-brainer when we added to the formula, improved the results or improved the uptake. And the reports back from our testing team were like, wow, we get more results with less caps. And that's always the goal for our company.
That's excellent. I love it. I always say, and people have probably heard me say it before, I just am so amazed how you guys are constantly and always improving and working your best to not only make better products for us, but it doesn't seem to me that it gets more expensive as you make them better. So that's a real gift to the world. Thank you. Where can people get their new Magnesium Breakthrough formula?
All they need to do is go to www.magbreakthrough.com/living4D. Put in Paul 10, get 10% discount on your first bottle. And of course, if you order multiple bottles, you can get an extensive discount on that as well. And like everything else we sell, 365-day money-back guarantee. If this isn't the best magnesium you've ever taken in your life. We demand that you tell us and we can give you your money back. But I think you're probably going to demand, hey, can I get more of this for my family?
That's probably more the truth. So that's magbreakthrough.com/living4, and then the letter D, code Paul 10. Enjoy deeper relaxation and better nutrition with Mag Breakthrough. One of the things you wanted to talk about that I think is really important is nature attachment theory
Mm-hmm.
and ecological awakening.
Yeah.
I've studied attachment theory,
Mm-hmm.
but I've never seen the word nature in front of it. So maybe you're coming at this from a different angle. Would you like to share what your concept of nature attachment theory and ecological awakening is?
It really goes back to what I was speaking about earlier, Paul, that developmentally for us as human beings, that I'm holding that we have a developmental need to come into our wholeness, to come into our greatness, to step into our potential, to have an active, ongoing relationship with the natural world. I mean, if we look at modern attachment theory, what's the basics of it? Okay, that we as human beings have a need to have an active bond with our parents, especially our mother.
Yep, especially the first 2 years.
Especially early on in life. And that if that is jeopardized or not present or not fully present, it's got ramifications on the rest of our lives. Now, certainly we can heal that and we can transform that. Thank
if you're
goodness.
lucky to find a skilled enough therapist.
Yes. Now, what I'm holding is that, and think about all the people out there who are aware of attachment theory and all the work that's being done in the world amongst humans today. What I'm holding is that, and I would say this for nature attachment theory as well as I would offer a soul attachment theory, that as a human being, we have a need that is no less important to have an active bond with the earth.
Yes.
And also to have an active bond with soul, with our reason for being. It's recognizing that that this is a need, and if it's not met, there's going to be a lack of belonging. There's going to be a feeling of a void, which we're all common. It's all too common these days, and we're all familiar with on some level, although we don't always know what it is or how to put a finger on it, or how to identify it, and that we will attempt to fill that void in all of these other unhealthy ways.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Drugs.
And so like what I've seen, for example, is I'm a part of a men's group back home, right? We meet every Wednesday night, 6 to 10 p.m. Great work.
Yeah.
Our work is mostly on emotional maturity work, being aware of our emotions, expressing those in healthy ways, and healing work. So we do a lot of healing of the past, and it's great work. But it's really just focused on that. It's focused on our human relationships. It's focused on what I would consider middle world activities. Middle world meaning the world that we all live in, and in the here and now. What it doesn't do is address my men's group. It doesn't address our connection with the natural world, right? And so I've seen guys come. I've been a part of a group for a dozen years. I've seen guys come through that clearly didn't have a connection to nature, and I've seen this in my professional work as well. And when just a little bit of attention is given to the connection to nature, and that becomes on board, we'll all see huge benefits in all these other areas of their lives: relationships, work, personal motivation, et cetera, despite maybe years and years of thinking, oh, there's some other layer of childhood trauma that I've got to address in order to get the successful results that I'm looking for in life. Right. So what I'm offering is that I think this is, and what I'm really hoping to share with the world, Paul, is that this connection to nature and the earth is so important, and it's largely missing from most people out there.
Yeah, it is.
And this is not that difficult to facilitate. It is growing in awareness. More and more people are starting to realize this. And that as you bring that on board, it fills in gaps that we have as human beings that really can't be filled in other ways. There's no amount of connection to other humans or no amount of connection to spirit that can make up for a lack of connection with the living earth that we have evolved.
Interestingly enough, connection to the living earth is connection to spirit.
Yes, it is eventually, but there needs to be an active, conscious.
Well, I'm speaking of the fact that all life is spirit moving slowly enough for you to interact with it. there is nothing but spirit.
Absolutely.
And so I think what you're describing, in my own view as a therapist, is it's like a staircase to heaven. First you got to start where you're at.
Yes.
And you connect with what's right in front of you. And then you start asking deeper questions. Well, what is it that makes everything alive? And then where did it all come from? And what does it take to keep it alive? There's nothing that can live here without the sun or the moon. So right away you say, well, wait a minute, whatever we think of this tree is or this wolf is can't be here without the sun and the moon.
No.
And so you just keep asking, well, what does it take to keep that alive?
Yeah.
And so next thing you know, it's all one.
Yes.
So there's this what's what I call the stairway to heaven. You got to start where you're at, because you can study mysticism and all sorts of fancy stuff, but still forget to water your plants.
That's right.
Feed your dog.
Exactly.
And yourself.
Exactly. Yeah.
What comes to my mind as you're talking about that is something quite shocking, and I suspect you're aware of this, but you realize the World Economic Forum is trying to push everybody into smart cities.
Oh, yeah.
And they're saying that we won't even be able to go out into nature because we're ruining nature. And you're going to have virtual reality, Mark Zuckerberg style headsets, and they're going to block all that off. And I say to people, there's only one fundamental problem here. You might want to look into the companies that are part of the World Economic Forum, and you'll find that they own the corporations that have destroyed the very nature that they're trying to keep us out of and blaming us for destroying.
Right.
So this is a date with the devil right here, and you better wake up to it fast, because it won't be long before the closest your kid can get to nature is a digital tree.
Yeah.
And a digital forest.
Yeah.
And that is going to lead to a complete and utter breakdown of the psyche of human beings.
Oh, yeah.
We will have
nightmare. I mean, we're
mental
already in a nightmare scenario. This is just next level.
It'll
my
be
God.
completely out of this world. Of course, for them, that means, look at all the drugs we can sell.
Of course.
There's an old saying, a mind makes a better tool than a master. And the same is true of technology.
Yes.
When it starts becoming your master, then Ahriman is the entity that shows up. Ahriman and Steiner's concept is the consciousness of machines and electricity and technology and
the Matrix.
The Matrix. So Ahriman's actual function is hardening. He crystallizes spirit into matter.
Yeah.
So from a spiritual perspective, Ahriman's what gives you bones, teeth, and a body.
Sure.
But Ahriman gone wild turns into a focus on materialism.
Yeah.
And Steiner says Ahriman, left to his own devices, will eat the earth alive and take everybody with it.
Right.
And Ahriman's all about automation and control and basically turning everybody into a robot, into a totally controllable entity.
Yeah.
And so isn't it amazing that all this technology is supposed to make our lives easier, but it's making us sicker and sicker and fatter and lazier and more lost and more confused.
Yeah.
And there we have a big problem. So you got Lucifer on one side trying to get you out of the world, and you got Ahriman on the other side trying to turn you into a fossil and or a robot.
Yeah.
And in the middle is the Christ principle, which says not too much, not too little.
Right.
You've got to find the middle of all this stuff.
Yes.
And I think that's where we're at in the world right now. And
That's where we're at.
That's why spending time with a guy like you is very important, because someone can come out and get out of the world, the city, to get into the world.
The natural world.
Realize the beauty of what is here.
Yes.
So Ahriman is also the creator of nature.
Yeah.
In its healthy form, but the Christ principle is balancing those two and having love and connection to all of it. And like the cell phone or the tool or the drug, using it so that it is actually contributing to your wholeness or your ability to heal or to live, but not abusing it so you get either checked out or sucked in. And I think that's the beauty of the Christ principle, which can also be the Tao or the Buddha nature.
Yeah.
It's not just a Christian concept. It's just that's the popular name that gets people's attention because we're in a Christian culture. But there's, many philosophies that find the middle for you.
Yeah. It's like walking the razor. Sometimes I'll refer to this as walking the razor's edge.
Yeah.
Everything in our modern community, our modern culture is pushing us to one of those extremes.
Yeah.
And it is the hardest thing. It's, or sometimes I refer to it as the salmon's journey upstream.
It is, yeah.
Right? We are going against the mainstream of community and culture to walk that middle road.
Yeah.
And it's tough. And if we don't create systems of support, friendships, alliances, find mentors, community that is supportive of this journey, there's no way someone's going to succeed. I mean, I'm so grateful for all the mentors I've had through the years.
Me too.
And the support, because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. Just wouldn't be here, right?
Neither would I.
I think it's so easy to lose that. Again, when we look at any earth-based community, any earth-based culture, they had a culture of mentoring.
Yes.
That was consistently present, supporting, again, not just the transfer of data, survival information from one generation to the next, but drawing out the best, activating the gifts, activating the vision, the purpose of each individual in that community so that the community as a whole can thrive. And that can't happen without caring mentors who show up day in and day out for someone, who see one's potential before one sees it themselves, who draw out the best. It changed, it brought out all of my best potential.
Yeah.
And through that experience, again, kind of like what we were speaking about earlier, how could I not want to share that with other people?
There's something called the weight of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And Steiner describes it as, think of knowledge like oranges on a tree. The more the tree can only get to a certain point before the branches will snap off.
Yes. Yeah.
And so it also correlates to Joseph Campbell's model of the hero's journey. When the hero goes off on his quest, he has to meet a mentor.
Yep.
Or he'll never make it.
That's right.
He has to come into contact with supernatural forces or he'll never make it. And when he successfully completes the quest, which is almost always about righting a social injustice, he has gained so much knowledge that if he doesn't come down the metaphorical mountain and share it, the weight of knowledge will kill you.
Kill him.
So it's hard for people like you and I at our level of maturity and life experience to just watch everybody dying and destroying the planet. Because we're like, wait a minute. But this goes back to another point. And if you look at tribal societies worldwide, it was always the elders that were educating the children.
Of course it was.
And there's the mentors.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got a very good book. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's called Metabolic Man, 10,000 Years from Eden.
No.
It's a great book.
Great.
By Charles Heiser Worthen, who is a naturalist. And he did a lot of research to calculate how much time did it take the average hunter-gatherer society to meet the needs for food and survival.
Basic survival needs,
And he calculated that on average it took them 3.5 to 4 hours a day.
Yeah.
And since they hunted in the morning, he did most of their hunting and gathering in the morning because a lot of places it's too hot in the afternoon.
Yeah.
He showed very clearly that early in the morning, the parents would get up, Dad would go hunting, Mom would go gathering with the women.
Yeah.
And the kids would go spend the first half of every day with Grandma, Grandpa, and all the elders.
Yeah.
And they would learn the songs, they would learn the myths, they would learn the dances, they would do arts and crafts.
Yeah.
They would do things like practicing making bows and arrows.
Oh yeah.
They would, they would actually really learn how to engage their skills, their senses.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And all the things that were important. And they would get taught by the wisest, most experienced, most empathetic and compassionate people. And they stated, and I've read this, that the elders needed to raise the children the most because they had the maturity to raise children.
Yes.
And the younger people didn't. They were too short-tempered and didn't have the depth of empathy and compassion and understanding.
And were too preoccupied by their survival tasks of hunting and gathering that they needed to do.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm totally familiar with this theory. I'm not familiar with the book and the author, but I'm very familiar with this theory. Yeah.
But the point being is, look at our elders today. Most of them
thrown away in nursing homes.
They want to get away. They want a cruise ship. They want a big
RV.
screen television.
Oh, yeah.
There's this complete disconnection,
right?
And paradoxically,
our kids are suffering.
Well,
Mom and dad are totally stressed out trying to
and
do too much.
we've got a whole culture of young people that think old people are fuddy-duddies
Oh,
and
yeah.
get them out of the way,
Totally,
and they're
totally.
outdated and old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So we've got a complete disintegration of
Yes.
exactly the multiple 2 million years, let's say, of human evolution in
Yeah.
nature. So we've been out in nature for a very long time, which is why our genes are so wired to nature. I mean,
Yeah.
we're like totally, nature lives in our genes.
Yeah.
I mean, fuck, if you look
Yeah.
at the studies on genetics, you got 23% of a fruit fly in you. You got 19% of a banana in you. And this is another point, which is people say, well, how is it you can talk to plants and trees and all this weird stuff? I'm like, you know what they call junk DNA? It's only junk because they're scientific materialists. But if you talk to a guy like me who can use his clairvoyance to look into this, that's the history of all the things that we've been in nature since the very beginning of evolution on this planet. You got
Beautiful.
4.9 billion years of experience in your DNA.
Yeah.
And so when I'm not talking to a plant out there, I'm talking to the plant of me.
Yes.
That my soul was once maturing into its own self-awareness as, which is exactly why Rumi and Ibn al-Arabi and others say Rumi was the one that popularized it. God sleeps in the minerals, dreams in the plants, moves in the animals, and realizes himself in man. And that's what our genes have done.
Yeah.
Slept in the minerals, dreamed in the plants, moved in the animals, and wake up and go, oh my God, here I am. Right? Which there was a question I wanted to ask you earlier.
Yeah.
What is your conception of the soul? Because I always ask people that because everyone listening has their own idea of the soul from thinking that it doesn't exist, like Yuval Noah Harari and the World Economic Forum said there's no such thing as a soul. You're a hackable animal. Get rid of these ideas of God and soul. They're bullshit.
Yeah.
So everyone's got a different conception of the soul. The different religions have different conceptions of the soul. What is the soul to you?
Great question. So I would say, gosh, what is soul? Well, if there is a place in me. So I'll say this. I look at soul as, I think, differently than maybe a kind of a classic religious perspective would offer. I don't see it as this thing that comes in and animates my body and then leaves when I die and moves on. I really see soul as, okay, so if there's a place in me that has the knowledge of why I'm here on this planet, I would call that place my soul. But it's simultaneously not just a place in me, and this is where it gets paradoxical. It's not just a place in me or a part of me. It's not a part at all. It is also the point where I experience myself as interconnected with all things. Mm-hmm. Because it is that spirit that is moving in and through all things, all of life, right? So I look at soul as really more verb than noun, if you will. I look at soul as a way of perceiving the world, a worldview, if you will, a way of perceiving the world that sees the perfection in everything so that it can recognize when I'm living from my soul, I'm seeing the gift in all experiences. And I don't say that lightly. I mean, we can apply that to gnarly, horrible trauma that happens to people. We can apply that to abuse. We can apply that to nasty stuff, that there are actually gifts in these things. And we kind of started here earlier, Paul, talking.
Well, without those things, there would be no capacity for wisdom.
Oh, yeah. Well, exactly. So the soul is that which understands which knows our purpose. And so the journey to connect with purpose then is really, I would see it as an ecological process even more than spiritual. Meaning, if we hold a mindset of all life is natural, then the question is, what is my niche in this world? What is my place? Not my habitat, not like the physical place, but my niche being my role. Where's my give and my take in this world? How do I fit as a puzzle piece in the great web of life? And the way I'll discover that is by making a connection with my soul. And how does a person make a connection with soul? my experience is the most effective ways of doing that are through nature. Are through especially quiet time, solo in nature, holding an intention of doing just that. When my intention is, why am I here? I want to make a connection with my soul. I want to touch the depths of who I am. The poets talk about this, right? David White talks about the truth. He would define soul as poetically as the truth at the center of the image I was born with. Right. And again, this is where I do believe soul is paradoxical and impossible to define, but poems and myths are probably a better way of defining it rather than an actual, written definition. So yeah, the journey of connecting with soul, I mean, that's really what my work has been these last, very consciously, intentionally, these last 7-8 years. I ran the wilderness school for, close to 15 years. And it was around, 2016, 2017. Great transformation with people, connecting people to nature, right? Really bringing people alive. I can't tell you how many times I had people come to me themselves, or maybe it might be a mom whose kid went through the program and say, Tim, you saved my life, or you saved my daughter's life, you saved my son's life. You brought them back to the essence of life itself.
Yeah.
But that, for me, Paul, was always through the conscious intention of connecting people to nature. So around 2016, 2017, I had a similar kind of midlife existential crisis where so I've always been very spiritually driven, right? And the reason I ran that wilderness school for all those years and still do is because it was my calling. That's where I experienced spiritual fulfillment. I knew this is why I'm doing what I'm meant to do here on this planet. So there came a point where that fulfillment went away. And I remember finishing up a summer camp season. We had several hundred kids come through, several dozen staff. My wife and I are managing. People reporting all the same things. This changed my life. This is incredible. And I felt like I had just freaking washed the dishes or something. It didn't mean anything. And it freaked me out, man. I was like, what in the hell is happening to my life?
Yeah.
This was my juice, like what is going on? So go back to my mentors, go back to my elders, go back to the land. A couple of vision quests later, long story short, what was happening? Well, I was evolving. And spirit and soul really was instructing me, Tim, it's time for you to get more conscious and more intentional about your work in the world, that it's not just to help people connect to nature. It still is, but we're adding a conscious layer on top of this, which is your work is now to help people connect to vision and to purpose. And that scared the heck out of me, Paul, because I'll be honest, there's nothing I hold more sacred than the journey of connecting with vision. It was like the greatest thing that could have ever happened to me when it happened to me. And the thought that I'm now going to get more intentional and more outward and kind of hang it on my shingle, that's what I'm here to do. Boy, that was a scary one for me. I mean, I had to face myself in an even deeper way. And yet it was also irresistible.
I'm sure most of you are aware, even though you may not like the taste of organs, that organ meats are extremely important and good for you. And I've got great news for you. Paleo Valley makes an amazing grass-fed organ complex that's unique and better than anything I've ever found out there. So much better, I wanted you to hear right from Autumn Smith, its creator, exactly what you're going to get from their grass-fed organ complex. Autumn, get us informed on why we should be using your amazing organ complex.
Okay, well, like you said, organ meats are nature's multivitamins. And when we use them, we feel this energy and this stamina. And most people don't like the flavor. So what we did was we took grass-fed and finished organs like liver and heart and kidney, and we just put them into capsules so that you can get all the benefits, the beautiful benefits of organ meats without actually having to taste them, without liver burps, of course. And they're just freeze-dried. So again, they're not processed heavily in any way whatsoever, and they are sourced from American farmers using regenerative agricultural practices. And I sincerely hope you love it.
Save 15% on your Paleo Valley organ complex by going to paleovalley.com/CHEK15. That's PALEO valley.com/CHEK15. No promo code is required. I teach I before we and we before all always. And my own midlife crisis was because I was living through the we and the all, mostly the all. So in my system, we is 2 people, all is 3 or more.
Okay.
So once you're at the all level, you're tasked with the responsibilities of a teacher because you have to carry the karma of misleading people.
Yes.
So we relationships is you and your son, you and your wife, where there's a direct person-to-person connection. But I is the basis of it all. You can't give what you don't have.
Yes.
And so I think what happens is you get so far into your career or your vocation or your soul path, and people that are usually guided by soul are generally much more skilled people than people that are just acting out social constructs. You could be a good lawyer.
Sure.
And you could be doing exactly what mommy and daddy wanted you to, and you're getting good grades in school, and you're making a good living.
Oh, yeah.
But you're still not connected to your soul. You've just become
and there's no spiritual fulfillment.
You've been a good boy and a good
you
girl.
Probably feel trapped.
And you're feeling dying inside, right? So you come home and you drink some wine and watch some junk TV, and you start living in another reality.
Oh, yeah.
But the point I'm driving at is that I think that a lot of us get lost in the we and the all and lose touch with the I, because especially in a Christian or Abrahamic religious culture where there's a lot of gratification to be in service, and to put oneself first is very frowned upon on many levels.
Yeah.
But, if we don't fill our own cup up, we don't really have anything to give. And so I think it's actually, I think, almost like an initiation into eldership, because you have to go through. This is why the bee said, no one can make honey alone.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You need to work with other people, but you also have to take care of yourself, because dead bees don't make honey. Sick bees don't make honey.
There was such a parallel there, Paul, because that's when I started Purpose Mountain. That's when I started getting intentional and hung my shingle as, okay, I'm here to help people connect with vision and purpose through nature connection. And at that point, my energy just started drawing back from the wilderness school.
Yeah.
Now, I've remained involved, but if you look at my trajectory personally with the school, what have I done over these last 6, 7, 8 years has been delegating. And exactly what the bees told you, working with others in that way, and I mean, every year that goes by, it's more and more of that. So I just kind of laugh because there's a lot of parallels here.
Oh yeah. You know, I think because we're talking about an archetypal experience.
Yes,
you and I are, the thing is, if you don't make this archetypal journey, then you just become sick.
It never unfolds. So you don't know.
You die in yourself.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I mean, for me, like, stories like this are actually uncommon for me in the world.
Yeah.
I'm like a handful of people. You're one of them who've gone through maybe a similar process. And I would agree. I think it is archetypal. And that's all still unfolding, in its own way.
It is unfolding. And, the way I could put it in metaphor is, what happens to the caterpillar that never becomes a butterfly? They die in the cocoon. And what is the cocoon? It's this enculturation. It's an enculturation into a way of living that is completely unnatural but profitable to a few.
Yeah.
And it's up to all of us to recognize the truth of what our heart is telling us, because no amount of new phones, fast cars, sexy clothing, or pornography fills that hole. The only way you can fill the hole in your heart is with love, and the only way you can fill it with love is you have to be present inside of yourself, and that is the soul connection.
Exactly.
Being conscious of what is being told you, not only by your body, but by your heart. I read a book on mythology by a guy named John Youngblood. And he said there was a line in that book that hit like a lightning bolt. He said, only the heart can deliver justice to the head.
Ah,
And
nice.
that's the fact.
Nice. Yeah.
That's the fact. The head is the realm of intellect, idea, and ego, but the heart is the realm of honesty and
Truth.
soul and feeling and
Yes.
connection and
Yes.
the realization of what we are and who we are.
Yeah.
Because that heart is it's the beat of life, right? It's the drummer that's making you alive. The head can completely dance off tune all day long.
Oh, God, yeah. The way I like to put it sometimes is you can never get enough of what you really don't need. You can never get enough of what you really don't need. And what's so interesting
That's
is...
a truism.
Isn't that a good one?
Yeah.
When people come out to me and they want to take the journey to vision, through the natural world, one of the first things I have them do is exactly the thing we're talking about is, okay, we're going to pause. Really, I frame it as sacrifice.
Yeah.
But we're going to pause all of the behaviors, all of the distractions that keep us away from listening to our heart.
Yeah.
And people slow down. They start to catch up with themselves. They start to feel what's out of alignment, right?
Do you notice do you notice there's often a period of wiggling and squirming?
Oh, are you kidding me?
And just like the vibration of
What do you ask me to do, Tim? This is crazy.
It's like
oh my God, I'm overwhelmed.
it's like an infant
Oh.
that's coming off the breast, but they don't
yeah.
realize it's the wrong breast.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But that's what they get a chance to see when they pull back.
Yeah.
If people could just pause long enough, this is what I tell people. If you could just pause long enough and stop all those behaviors that are distracting you from the truth in your heart and the truth of your connection to the world, you would realize there's all these pieces that are out of alignment in your life that need addressing.
Yeah.
But all of those compensatory behaviors, the drugs, the sex, the screens, on and on and on, keeps you numbed out from recognizing what's off track, right?
Yeah.
And so, and then people are actually able to slow down and get honest with themselves. The old traumas that are unhealed, of course, are going to pop up. They're going to have to face all of that stuff. And underneath that, they're going to be able to have that moment of connecting with something timeless and eternal, with their soul, with the truth of at the center of their image of why they're here.
Yes.
And with the earth itself. And those are like, again, I mean, to me, it's like, I don't know. I feel like I kind of hit the jackpot on. You ever feel this way? Like I feel like I won the lottery on life to do the work that I do. It's like it's such an honor. I love it. It fires me up so much. It's a ton of hard work, But that's the thing about living from soul. Back to your question on defining soul, is one of the indicators I think that a person is aligned with soul is that chi energy, which you're so fond of speaking about, Paul, is alive and it's present in them and it fuels them. And yeah, it's a lot of hard work, but there's also that sense of timelessness and like, man, I can't believe I get paid to do this. And this is the greatest joy of my life. This is why I'm here.
When you're living in tune with your soul, you're living a labor of love.
Yes.
And the reason that's important is because a labor of love is sustainable.
Yes.
Anything else is not sustainable. It produces disease. The example I often give is, if you want to know what a labor without love is, just have your next door neighbor drop their kids off for 2 weeks and say, I've got an emergency, I need you to take care of my kids.
Right.
And you will have a very hard time dealing with somebody else's kids because they're not your own. And the work of parenting, especially a kid between 1 and 4, right, is a lot of work.
That's a lot of work.
And
man.
it takes
That's a lot of work.
real love connection from mom and dad to work through that, because it disorients your whole adult way of being, right?
Right.
The reason it's so important to get the guidance, in which is I'm teaching this constantly, as you are, my whole system's based on this, is to, and I have techniques for accessing your soul. So I do actually teach methodology for going directly to that and developing that relationship, because that's, look, I got almost 150 books on the soul. Only 2 of them mention anything about how to make contact with your soul.
Practical applications of connection.
And I'm like, okay, you guys, all these experts on
Give
the
me a
soul,
break,
but
right?
nobody even tells you how to have a relationship with it. It's like,
what's going on here?
It's just like a bunch of fairy tales about the soul.
Do you know Thomas Buechner, the theologist? Okay, great quote. You're going to love this one. He would say soul or purpose or life vision, pick your choice of terminology there, is the place where Your greatest gladness meets the world's hunger.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
And that point of intersection where that I was describing that we've been talking about here, when you are lit on fire and offering a genuine service to the world that the world needs at this time.
Yes.
You are on track. You are not dissociated with the world. You are very present, walking that razor's edge and delivering your gifts that you were actually born with, in that deeply satisfying way. That is a labor, because it is. It's a ton of work. And I asked you earlier, I said, gosh, Paul, what do you attribute your success to? And what do you say to me? You said, well, hard work and passion, I think. Isn't that what you said?
Exactly, yeah.
And I was like, there it is. There's a man who's found his soul. I mean, it's so apparent to me. I'm really just getting to know you, for the first time here. But it's so apparent to me that you've aligned with your soul and that your work is from that place. Because how else could you possibly do all of this?
I think I was talking to a guy on my podcast, real cool guy, Daryl Schoon, and he gave an example that I can't remember. I'm going to bastardize it, but I'll give you what it wants to come out of me as is we were talking about like your soul path, and it's when you have an encounter with your own dream on the path of life.
Yeah.
When you have an encounter with your own dream on the path of life. If I summarize what soul is based on my experience, soul is simply stated the consciousness within. So like if you're listening to your conscience or you're connecting to your heart and saying, should I marry this person, or should I make this investment, or should I punch this person in the nose right now? You're speaking to the consciousness within. That's soul. And soul is also well defined in Greek as entelechy, the guiding intelligence.
Entelechy,
right?
yeah.
So that's the guiding intelligence. That's what's telling your heart to beat. That's what's digesting your food, metabolizing, assimilating, eliminating, healing. That's what's, there's 30 billion biochemical reactions a second in the human body. That's a big number.
That's a lot.
You got 100 trillion cells, depending on whose book you read, but 100 trillion is a common number used. Nassim Haramein, a quantum physicist, says each cell is made on average of 100 trillion atoms. So you got 100 trillion cells made of 100 trillion atoms orchestrating 30 billion biochemical reactions of a second, and soul is what's managing that.
All of that.
Ego is what's riding that spiritual elephant, going, go this way, go that way.
Convinced that it's in control.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's Nassim Haramein says they got it up backwards. What they call consciousness should be the unconscious.
Right.
What's unconscious should be the consciousness because it's way more intelligent. But yeah, so for me, the soul is the guiding intelligence.
I love that.
And that's
beautiful.
That's what makes the flower know where the sun is.
Yes.
Right. That's what makes a dog know what to hunt, and an animal in nature know what not to eat or what to eat or when not to pick a fight.
My elders used to call this, I had an elder, Jake Swamp, who was a sub-chief of the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk tribe, Haudenosaunee people. And he referred to this, the Iroquois, the Haudenosaunee referred to this as our original instructions.
Yeah.
And that there are original instructions for everything on this earth. As you said, the plant that knows how to reach for the sun, a predator that knows who to go after. And that includes us as human beings. Mm-hmm. And that we do have a unique set of original instructions.
Yeah.
And again, back to this idea of a vision, that soul is what knows our vision, our purpose. That's the great adventure of life is, man, what are mine? And I'm thinking of all those listeners out there and just like, everybody, women, men, people of all genders, everything, you've all got something. There is an original instruction for you out there. And that's such a big part of my message, Paul, that I really want people to feel, more than hear, to feel is like, there is something that's yours. And if you haven't found that, it's available. It is possible. I know for years and years, I really didn't believe there was anything for me early on in my life. I was like, I thought life was a mistake or random or something,
Yeah.
It's so disempowering.
I think soul, too, is that within us which knows where we fit
Yes.
into the puzzle of life.
The great puzzle of life.
It knows where we fit.
Yes.
We both mentioned our connection to mythology and its deep relationship to all this. What's your definition of a myth?
Are you familiar with Michael Mead is the fellow's name who I'm
I've
thinking
heard
of.
his name. Yeah.
Okay. He's a mythologist, and he talks about myth as a myth is a story that is more true than true, that is more real than real. Meaning, it's not that the elements of a myth are factual and that they took place in physical reality, but that they speak to a deeper truth that we experience as human beings here on planet Earth. And there are, of course, worldly and cultural myths that are common throughout our world and cross-culturally throughout time. And then, of course, we've got personal myths.
Yeah.
And this idea that there is a central narrative, a central story that typically is unconscious for most people unless there's been some kind of awakening, that is guiding their life, a combination of beliefs and that make up a broader narrative that animate them, that impact the actions and the choices that they make in this world.
I think the function of myth really boils down to meaning making.
Yes.
And myth is also very mysterious. One of my all-time favorite authors, James Carse.
Okay. Great.
He wrote the book Finite and Infinite Games, which is phenomenal. One of the top 10 books of my life.
Oh, cool.
One paragraph will throw you into a contemplative meditation for a week. And in my interview with him, I asked him how he defines myth, and one of the definitions he gave, a myth is a story that tells itself. And that's really very much the soul. It's what's telling the story of you.
Yeah.
And it's the ego that stops us from listening to the story of ourselves. And if we don't listen to the story, then we can't make meaning. So we can do everything else that someone else tells us, which is their control dramas usually, but we lose touch with the story that's telling us.
Yeah.
And so the reason we're talking about this is because, when you're doing your work with helping people find their visions, then that's a very mythological quest.
One of the things that's so important that we've been speaking about here, Paul, is what is our relationship with the experiences in our lives that we were not initially at peace with, aka our wounding.
Yeah.
Right. What is my relationship with my wounding? How do I relate to that? Do I relate to it? Have I got the whole thing buried in my unconscious? Or am I conscious of it? And do I let those wounding experiences create beliefs about me? I'm unworthy. I'm not a good person. Other people are more important. Yeah, I can't. I won't. I'll never amount to.
Yeah.
I'll never be important enough. Or have we learned to transform those?
Yeah.
And the reason why I think doing personal mythology work is so important with people, and I do that as a conscious step. It's typically, I actually work on that later on in the process after the deep inner transformative work has taken place as kind of an encapsulating moment for people to look back at their life and redo the story and say, like I think of myself, right? Okay, sensitive boy, emotionally sensitive, spiritually sensitive. No fun to be the emotionally sensitive boy when I was 10 years old in the fourth grade locker room, right? Now I don't say that to get people's pity. I say that to let people know, hey, I had a real hard time with those experiences, and I took it on to believe the personal myth I made that mean, the meaning making I'd made out of it was there's something wrong with me. I'm a piece of shit. I'm not important. Other people are more important. And in my journey of connecting with vision, that involved the healing journey, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was sensitive, that this isn't something I could turn off or throw away. This was a core attribute of who Tim Corcoran is in the world. And if I was going to really touch my vision, I had to come to peace with that. Now, how do I do that when there was all this wounding associated with it. Well, after I went through my healing process, I was able to see it for what it is, like fire or water. It's just something. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And in the wrong scenario, in a cultural scenario that doesn't value that sensitivity, it's going to be seen as a negative.
Yeah.
And I'll be made fun of for it, et cetera, et cetera. But in another cultural context, enter deep nature connection mentoring culture. Wow, you're sensitive? Oh my gosh. You're the one who can notice the subtle tracks in the sand. Or you're the one who can sense the emotions of another person and help move that person along their journey.
Yeah.
I was leading a young men's rite of passage. So this is a formal initiation where 13-year-old males are coming through the transition of puberty, and they're leaving behind boyhood consciously, intentionally, entering into adolescence and formally entering into young manhood. Mm-hmm. We were one of the ceremonies I work with is the sweat lodge.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh man, it's powerful work.
I say do a sweat lodge before you do a bunch of psychedelics.
Oh yeah. So I was working with the sweat, and I had there was 8, 10, maybe 12 boys that were coming through this initiation, and I had my staff with me, and there was one guy who I'd connected with quite a bit. And you have those certain students that like just stand out in your journey as a teacher and mentor. And he was one of those for me, and had so much to teach me. And well, I could sense he had a similar journey to mine. He had been socially ostracized, and he had struggled in socially, all this stuff. And I could sense that he was right on the cusp of actually birthing all that grief for the first time. Mm. But he needed that encouragement. He needed a little bit more safety and a little bit more mentoring, a little encouragement. So I did so, and I was following my own soul, my own calling to do that. And this guy just cracked. And for the next hour and a half after the sweat was over, he was out and just bawling. Now, he was a big processor, a bit, pretty vocal. And so a lot of cathartic release going on here. And all of this upset and all of this trauma and disconnection leaving his body. And man, my staff hadn't seen anything like this before. This was kind of a new edge for a lot of them, and they were getting frazzled. And I was like, "You guys, we're good here. We're good." And I got my hand on his back, and I just sat with him, and I allowed this to move through, and I supported him. And I had this moment. It was almost an out of body experience for me, Paul, where I looked back at many of those moments of being bullied, of being made fun of, and the hurt and the pain that genuinely felt in those moments when I was a boy. And for the first time in my life, it wasn't that I had done my healing work on it, but for the first time in my life, I actually felt thankful, genuinely glad that those things had happened. Not because, I was into suffering, but because it allowed me to actually empathize with this other human being in front of me. And I knew in that moment that I could not be helping him if I had not gone through those same situations.
Yeah, you could go into resonance with him.
Yes. I'm thinking about our listeners. If you look at the moments you've been hurt in this life, notice how it's like it's pushing this button and it's identifying for you where you are uniquely sensitive. It hurts at first, but if you're able to make that shift and see, oh, this is something I'm walking with, this emotional sensitivity, this spiritual sensitivity in my case. This is something that I am carrying, and I can relate to this differently. It doesn't have to be a bad thing.
Right.
This can be a good thing. And moving forward now, I look at the work I do, and I think, my God, I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for that sensitivity. There's no way. I couldn't function. I depend on that sensitivity.
Yeah.
The same thing I once hated. The same thing that at 22, I would have told you I would have paid a dollar amount to get rid of in my life. There's a relationship here when it comes to personal mythology work. There's a relationship between our wounds and our power. And I really invite our listeners to sit with that one deeply. The places where we've been wounded are often pointing towards our power. Some people talk about this as the sacred wound is the other side of the coin of our sacred gift. These were actually gifts from soul, from mystery, secretly disguised as wounds that were actually pointing me to my ultimate calling in this life.
That's why a mentor is so important, because
Yes.
oftentimes without a mentor, you
But you can't see that.
You can't bridge the
No,
gap.
no, you can't. You can't bridge
it's
that.
as though you're on one side of the rainbow, but you only see one color. You don't realize there's 7 more. And the pot of gold on the other side of the rainbow is the realization that there is perfection in the imperfection.
Yeah, exactly.
And Rumi says that the reason for a broken heart is to let our love pour out. And some of us get too encapsulated in the mundane and in routine and stop living. And so sometimes it takes a jolt, a crisis, a lightning strike, a divorce. You sometimes have to walk the edge of death to find life.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I suspect you've heard me speak about the Chek Academy on my podcast, and I'd love to extend a very special offer we've created for all of you. We created the Chek Academy so that anyone wanting to master a truly holistic approach to living, rehabilitation, strength and conditioning, athlete development, or holistic lifestyle coaching can gain mastery with the guidance and the support of true masters, the Chek Institute instructors and mentors. The Chek Academy is ideal for anyone wanting a career change, to enhance their professional skills and meet the demands of the public today, and is a multidisciplinary program. We have doctors and therapists of many types and encourage cross-pollination because none of us has the full range of expertise to handle all the challenges people commonly present with today. We encourage all Chek professionals to network with other experts and to learn and grow by working together for the betterment of all, and particularly the patients and clients. The Chek Academy Open House is an opportunity for anyone interested in the Academy to get a taste of the Academy learning experience. The Open House is free to everyone. The Open House provides 7 days of access to the Chek Academy e-learning platform, and participants will be able to take select lessons from our online courses, including Integrated Movement Science Level 1 online and Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 2 online. Preview our Academy exclusive online workshops. Check out our Academy business assets like package templates, client onboarding checklists, and more. Watch group mentor sessions. Hear from current students about how they're applying what they've learned. You will also receive a free Chek career consultation with Gavin Jennings, CEO of the Chek Institute and co-founder of the Chek Academy, so any questions you have can be answered. You can register for the open house right now, but registration for this event ends on September 22nd, so please don't wait to the last minute. To register for the open house, go to chek.group/open-house. That's chek.group/open-house. Enjoy your free access to the Chek Academy, and feel free to talk to Gavin and get all your questions answered. We'd love to have you, and as you all know, the world needs a lot more holistically skilled, open-minded, health and exercise professionals right now, and this is your great opportunity to be the best.
One of the challenges that we all have to go through as young, budding adults, coming into our teenage years, we have this natural tendency to reject mom and dad's ideas because with mom and dad's ideas are a generation out of touch with what culture is doing at any given moment.
Yep.
If we don't have the inner strength to go on that hero's journey and do the work and get the life experience, which includes the wounding, to figure out who we are and what our story is, then we have to suffer the long-term pain of living someone else's story.
Yes.
Which is almost always mom or dad, or mom and dad, or the church or society. But it doesn't actually touch us deeply enough. We have to come into contact with ourself. So if we don't have someone that guides us into ourself, then we end up having quite often to bang into ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And
which is not fun.
Yeah, it's I give you a sort of a quick little mythological story. When I was young, I was a very successful stock car racer, and I was only 19 at the time. One day, my whole pit crew pulled me aside and said, "You never mention us in all your newspaper interviews, and we're the ones that give you the ability to win those races. Yes, you're a better driver than we are. That's why you're the driver.
Yeah.
But you can't do it without us.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't start acknowledging us, we're not going to support you anymore. It was a very painful experience for me because I had no conscious realization that I was doing that. And it was only when they brought it up that I realized, wow, I've never mentioned my pit crew in any of these interviews, you know. I think if I look back at to why that was, it's a paradox. My father never once told me that I'd done a good job, no matter how hard I tried.
Yeah.
And so I think I became so desperate for accolade to feel alive, like my life had some meaning, that I had kind of been medicating that wound through doing the work to get the attention, which is why I competed to be a champion athlete and tried to do the best at everything that I could do.
Mm-hmm.
But now I had reached a point where spirit or soul or the myth was saying, okay, now you've got to start taking people with you on this journey, because there's nobody can do anything meaningful in the world by themselves.
Yeah.
And so that was sort of a mythological transition point for me.
I love that.
And it was, I literally had tears in my eyes, and my heart felt like it was going to break.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, without our story, there's nothing to us. There's, you know, which really brings up an important point about the soul. Memory is an inherent aspect of the soul, because if we don't have memory, we don't have any way of knowing who we are. That's why they say the greatest thing about having Alzheimer's disease is you get to meet new people every day, because you have no history.
Yeah.
You have no capacity for self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think our myth is not only our memory, but it is the capacity to look at that aspect of our soul in context with what is needed by those that support us and those that we're supporting, and by the world. I had many points in my life where I could go that path, but there was something inside of me that knew that wasn't ultimately. I could have made millions selling Swiss balls, and I had many offers to start my own factory and all. I said, look, I'm not here to sell Swiss balls.
Yeah.
I'm here to teach. I think our personal myth and our collective myth is important. I think if our personal myth isn't in support of the collective myth, then we probably don't really have our personal myth.
Yeah. One of the ways I look at it is, if a person has truly connected with their authentic personal myth, is that their behavior will be a purpose-driven.
Yes.
They'll be living a purpose-driven life.
Yes.
Whereas if they haven't, they'll still be living a wound-driven life.
Yes.
So like in your example, you know, when you still had those wounds were still unconscious from your dad, it sounds to me like, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, but that all that achieving was driven by the wounds. It wasn't driven by vision or purpose.
No.
It was driven by wounds. Whereas now you're still an incredible achiever. No one could deny that, but it's not being driven by wounds.
No.
That behavior is being driven by your calling, by your purpose and love. Exactly.
And also the myth, right? Because
and the myth. Absolutely.
When you understand how critical your personal myth is and how intimate it is in relationship to the myth of the whole or the world, then you realize that to ultimately fulfill your life path and fill your heart, you need to be honest with yourself. You really need to be honest with yourself, and that's the hero's journey, because most of the time being honest with yourself means someone's going to get upset at you. And it's usually mom, dad, wife,
husband,
brother, sister. It's almost always, paradoxically, the people that you have the closest connection to that love you the most that become the greatest resistance to you being you, because they want you to be the person they've created you to be instead of who you really are. And that's the hero's journey. That's why you are the hero. You have to go off on your own trail. And if you don't have enough intestinal fortitude to stick to your guns and be who you came to be, then you have to suffer the pains of not being that person. And to me, those are actually greater, because being who you came to be, you get stronger and more full and more fulfilled, no matter how bad it hurts.
And the ultimate cost of not doing that is much greater.
It's a long, slow death.
Yeah.
Or a
than
fast
the
one.
opposite.
It can be suicide.
Yeah. I mean, it really comes down to the classic distinction between social acceptance versus living authentically.
Yep.
And recognizing there's a deeper truth, there's this deeper myth, this deeper purpose inside of me that needs to be expressed.
Yes.
If I am going to be in integrity with myself as a human being on planet Earth, if I'm going to find real fulfillment, if I'm going to, which is ultimate happiness and joy, and if I don't do that, and it may disappoint people. There's going to be people out there. I mean, I was just telling my oldest son this. I was like, bud, no matter what you do or where you go, there's going to be people in this life who approve of you and those who don't.
Yeah.
That's always going to be true. Actually, my old professor Foley told me that years and years ago. And he said, so what's it going to be? Are you going to live to please others and live that whole lie, trying to gain others' approval? And still knowing that even that you're never gonna gain everyone's approval, even if you try that. Or are you going to live your truth, knowing that some people are going to love you for it and some people won't, and truly be who you are and be in alignment with your calling, alignment with your heart, alignment with soul? That's the only path I can't imagine not living that.
No, and I think one of the common denominators, like one of the key building blocks of all this that we're talking about, if you don't accept yourself first, if you don't accept responsibility to heal, if you don't accept responsibility to look into your story and see, is it empowering or disempowering? If you don't accept responsibility for making yourself happy, loving yourself, and being your own best friend, then you're always going to be in a codependent relationship.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it be with drugs or people or the government or money or whatever. It's and that's the opposite of freedom. That's a death stroke to freedom.
And the greatest ways I've seen to support people to come into that kind of true love for themselves, again, I mean, going back to the connection with nature and the connection with soul, that when people make that when they awaken ecologically, they find themselves loved by the earth. They realize, my God, I am a child of this earth. We've been talking about initiation. The Africans have a saying that the function of initiation is to move someone from the lap of their mother, their human mother, to the lap of Mother Earth.
Yes.
Meaning that's the individuation process.
Yes,
it's the process of coming into oneself, of feeling that love externally. God, I just brought a woman through Vision Quest a couple months ago. A profound experience where, this is a woman who was traumatized as a girl, really difficult upbringing, had done therapy, had done ayahuasca, had done all these different things, and never, found the relief she was looking for. This was all pretty evident within the first couple of days of our group process prior to the big solo. And when she went out on solo, she had this absolutely incredible experience of, for the first time, feeling love, in this case, through this juniper tree that she was sitting underneath. And she genuinely felt the love of the earth, of Grandmother Earth, through this juniper tree. And so at first it was kind of externalized, but she carried that with her through the 4 days and was able to bring that home with her, and that feeling of being loved, and was able to transfer that internally. So it was literally, we could say that the tree was actually teaching her to love herself.
Yes.
And lo and behold, surprise, surprise, her life has turned upside down in the best way possible. I mean, it flipped a 180, and she's empowered, and she's making success in relationships and friendships and work, and all of these things are unfolding because she did that very thing, because she found that love for herself. And the reason I brought that up with her example is because, look, I'm aware it's way easier said than done.
Yeah.
When I'm imagining, again, our listeners, if people are out there sitting there who don't have a lived experience of feeling that in the moment, it's a big deal to be feeling that. And I remember that, years ago when that was like that for me. But transformation is possible. Change is possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to really take from this.
Yeah. I think one of the notes I had there was, one of the challenges we have, which this points to, is we externalize our sense of self into what we do for others, or what they do for us, or how much money we have, or what your favorite football team is, and whether they win or lose. You watch how people behave when their team loses. It's like, oh, really? My God, you're a 3-year-old in a 28-year-old body or something.
Seriously.
It's just like, give me a break. But, and that's a transition too. That's a spiritual transition, is bringing your consciousness back into yourself, being present with yourself, and seeing yourself as in relationship to, but not dependent upon this stuff outside of you for your identity.
Yeah.
One of the things I do to help people identify their personal myth is I have key categories of where to look to see the polarities in your life.
Nice.
What's your belief about God?
Yep.
What's your relationship with money? What are your beliefs about sex? What are your beliefs about mom and dad? What are your beliefs about the people that you don't like? Who are the people you don't like? What's your belief about people of different racial, ethnic origins? So I hit all the key pressure points.
Great.
And say, I want you to write down what your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs are about this. And then that shows them exactly where they're polarized.
Mm-hmm.
And they see that polarization is an attractive factor. That's a magnetic attractor that draws the very people that you don't like to you, so that you can actually come to realize what you're creating by empowering that story. Because if you change your myth and you grow first into yourself, but then see everybody around you as supporting you to realize yourself, then you say, okay, those people that drove me nuts actually only drove me nuts because I had a fixed viewpoint that wasn't even my own. It was planted in me.
Right.
Like a good example is my grandparents lived in Los Angeles, and they had this real phobia about black people. And one time, a black family moved across the street from my grandparents, and I was out skateboarding, and I met the boy who was my age, and he was like to ride skateboards. So we were out hanging out riding skateboards.
Sure.
And I really love this guy. We got along like peas in a pod. And I invited him over just to come hang out with me.
Yeah.
And oh my God, my grandparents came home, and the whole energy shifted, and they looked like they had seen the devil. And they said, well, Paul's got to eat dinner now. You're going to have to go home. And as soon as he walked out the door, I just got this whole lecture about how you never let a black person come in the house and how bad they were. And I'm like, he's my friend.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about. Like, so they had their own bias, right? And they were trying to put that into me, but I'd already made connection with this kid at the heart. But you see, the point I'm making is there's a pivotal point in a child's life where you actually get injected with someone else's myth, and it can lead you to a lot of pain. And look what it's done in the world right now. And I think that's why when we have this experience, like when we realize that exactly what the woman, that the tree loved her, well, would you walk around saying, I'm only going to love a white tree and not a brown tree? Or,
exactly.
It becomes so ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
So I think part of the process is that we have to find our way back to our center, because when we're in our center, we're in a place beyond movement. We're in a place beyond idea. We're in a place of deep connection. And once we're in the center, then we can actually start to realize more of who we are. And then we can easily see who we're not, even though we've been told that we're that, or we've convinced ourselves, or someone else has convinced us.
The core issue of our time, I firmly believe, is disconnection and separation.
Yeah, totally.
And especially from nature, soul,
self,
the deep self.
Yeah.
And then, of course, other humans.
To close, why don't you tell us what it is that you offer and where people can find you to investigate more?
So I've got 2 organizations. Purpose Mountain is where I would encourage people to start for adults looking at connecting with purpose, vision, soul, exploring their personal myth. and the work I offer there. There's really two big pieces I'm offering right now. One is I offer one-on-one personalized mentoring, and I typically talk about that as purpose discovery work, nature-based purpose discovery work. And then, of course, the Wilderness Vision Quest, which are in-person 10-day immersions, typically small group, myself and another facilitator, and we'll take maybe up to 12 people for a big 10-day immersion, 3 days of group work and processing, connecting with nature, mentoring, a big 4-day solo, fasting in the wilderness. It's the deep dive for sure, not for the faint of heart, followed by 3 days of really potent group work to support the integration process. I mean, we haven't spoken about that, but that's another big one that is so important to me, Paul, is with transformational work, the importance of proper preparation and proper integration. And that word is thrown around so much these days. It just frankly makes me sick.
It's the same with plant medicine use.
Exactly. Well, exactly. But I'm very serious about the proper prep and integration. And we do Zoom calls beforehand and afterwards and the whole thing. So for folks who are interested in purpose discovery, visionary development, vision quest work, check me out at Purpose Mountain. That's www.purposemountain.com. And then for folks interested more on the nature connection side of things, they can check out my wilderness school, which is Twin Eagles Wilderness School.
Great.
That's up in Idaho, up in Sandpoint, Idaho, where my wife and kids and I live. And we've got year-round programming for adults, kids. We do family programs. We do instructor training, youth summer camps, father-son program. My wife runs a mother-daughter program. Mentor development, all kinds of good stuff. So that's Twin Eagles Wilderness School, www.twineagles.org.
I think today, for everybody, but especially young kids, getting back in touch with nature. I think also, too, having those skills really gives you a sense of safety and security that you can't get anywhere else.
No. That's a very unique piece. There's certain lessons through wilderness survival, through connecting with nature, and the Vision Quest, I firmly believe that just can't be learned anywhere else in life. You know, this is a unique component of life on planet Earth for us human beings.
Perfect. What a great podcast. Thank you. I really enjoyed
Paul,
it.
It's such a pleasure, man. This is so cool connecting with you, being hosted here at your home.
Thank you.
You've got a great thing. You've accomplished so much. I'm really impressed with you and your vision and what you've done in this life and how many people you've helped and what an honor it is for me to join you here today.
Well, it's my pleasure. Birds of a feather flock together.
That's right.
It gives me a sense of hope when I realize every time I meet somebody like you that's out there, especially that's fulfilling the role as a teacher and a guide. I'm hoping some of you listening are inspired to go study with Tim and then learn how to go off on your own, let him mentor you and bring more of this to the world. So I'll close by saying thank you to my sponsors. Thank you to all of you. Thanks for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. I sure did. Thank you to any of you who buys any of the products from my sponsors. It supports the podcast and helps me take the time and energy it takes to find the guests, do the research, and put it all together and pay the podcast team. We can take this world we've got and shine her up and get the soils fixed up and clean the water and stop funding the lost souls that are destroying the planet for profit. And we can create circles, stand together, sing together, dance together, and make love on a big scale. So, lots of love. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Tim Corcoran. You can find Tim online at purposemountain.com, where you can request his free Purpose Discovery Kit. This is a nature-based approach to finding your life's purpose, even if you're struggling with resistance, fear, or doubt. You can also find more details on Tim's one-on-one mentoring and vision quests. For more information on the Twin Eagles Wilderness School, offering nature and wilderness survival camps for kids, teens, and adults, go to twineagles.org. And don't forget to download Tim's free Edible Wild Plants ebook while you're there. Connect with Tim and the Twin Eagles Wilderness School on Facebook at Twin Eagles Wilderness School, on Twitter at Twin Eagles WS, or visit their YouTube channel at twineagles.org. Catch up with Paul on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at paul.chek, on Twitter at paulchek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/living4D with Paul Chek. Watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com or visit the Chek Institute site at chekinstitute.com to find Paul's e-learning courses, advanced training programs, and to learn more about the Chek Academy. You can read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. This podcast would not be possible without the support of our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Organifi, and our newest sponsors, Ned and Wild Pastures. Please show your appreciation by taking advantage of their special discounts for listeners. The links are in the show notes. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Google Podcast, and YouTube.